You've heard of the Roman Empire, the marble palaces, the glorious conquests, the legendary emperors. But what if I told you there's a part of that history no one dares to show? Behind the glory was a hidden world of horror, where children were bought, owned, and broken before they ever knew freedom. This is the true story of a young boy named Titus, forced into slavery in one of Rome's wealthiest households. But what happened to him will leave you speechless. Stay until the end, because the final chapter reveals a secret buried for centuries. And don't forget to subscribe for more untold and emotional stories from history. Titus didn't remember freedom. He was born behind stone walls, his first cries echoing through the dim corridors of a Roman villa. Not as a son, but as property. His mother, a slave herself, was sold before he turned 5. After that, he belonged entirely to Lucius Varius, a senator obsessed with order and dominance. The villa was beautiful to outsiders. Pillars, fountains, mosaics. But for the slaves within, it was a golden cage soaked in fear, especially the children. Titus, now 11, spent his days scrubbing marble floors, feeding dogs, and cleaning latrines. His arms were thin, his feet blistered from walking barefoot across gravel. The older slaves had stopped calling him by name. To them, he was boy, another body in the house's machinery. But even in silence, he observed. He watched the way the guards avoided the eastern wing at night. He heard whispers of a place called the Pit, a chamber beneath the villa where disobedient slaves were corrected. No one ever came back the same. One morning, Titus made a mistake. He was pouring wine for a guest, a tall man in purple robes, eyes sunken from drink. Titus's hand trembled. A few drops splashed onto the guest's toga. Silence fell. Lucius, seated nearby, lifted his gaze slowly. "Come to me," he said softly. Titus stepped forward, head lowered. Lucius leaned in. "Tonight, you'll learn what happens when carelessness goes unpunished." The words wrapped around Titus like a rope. All day, he worked with shaking hands. The other children avoided his eyes. When dusk came, the guards found him by the courtyard and led him away. Past the kitchen, past the rooms he knew, toward a heavy wooden door he had never seen opened. It creaked on its hinges. Inside was a single chair, a torchlight, and a metal grate in the floor. Lucius stood beside it. "Do you know what this is?" he asked. Titus didn't respond. Lucius smiled. "This is where I break what's wild." He pulled a lever. The grate groaned open, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. And without a word more, Lucius gestured for Titus to go down. The air grew colder with each step. Titus descended the narrow stone staircase, one trembling foot after another. The torchlight from above flickered and faded, replaced by damp shadows and the stench of rot. Somewhere in the darkness, water dripped steadily. The iron grate clanged shut above him. He was alone. The pit wasn't a room. It was a passage, carved beneath the villa like a forgotten wound. The walls were slick with moss, the floor scattered with broken pottery, bones, and old chains. There was no light, only what his eyes could make out through the black. Then came the whispers. Soft, faint. Not Latin, not Greek, just fragments of breath. At first, Titus thought they were in his head, but they weren't. He followed the narrow corridor deeper. It curved like a serpent, coiling inward, until it opened into a low, circular chamber. The center of the room was scorched black, as if something had burned there long ago. Around the edges of the room, there were marks on the walls, scratches, handprints, and one word carved in dozens of places. Libertas. Freedom. Titus's heart raced. He turned to leave, but something moved behind him. He froze. A figure crouched in the corner. A boy no older than himself, shirtless, thin, eyes wide with terror. He didn't speak. He just stared, unmoving. "Who are you?" Titus whispered. The boy didn't respond. He lifted a finger to his lips, silently telling him to stay quiet. Titus stepped back, but his foot hit a chain and it clattered across the stone. Within seconds, footsteps echoed down the corridor. Lucius's voice boomed from above. "You're not alone down there, are you?" Titus panicked. He turned toward the boy, but the figure was gone. The corner was empty. Had he imagined it? The footsteps grew louder. Lucius appeared at the top of the stairs, holding a torch. "So," he said coldly, "you've met what's left of my failures." He descended slowly, torch casting eerie shadows along the walls. He approached Titus, who was frozen in place. "You think you're different?" Lucius asked. "You think you'll survive this place?" Titus shook his head. Whether in fear or defiance, he didn't know. Lucius raised a whip. "Let's find out." But just as he stepped forward, the flames of his torch flickered violently, then extinguished, as if something breathed them out. Darkness swallowed them whole. Lucius cursed. A deep, heavy sound echoed from the walls. Then, a scream. But it wasn't Titus who screamed. Lucius stumbled back, torch falling from his hand. Something had grabbed him from the dark, and Titus didn't wait to see what. He ran. Back through the corridor, up the stairs, hands shaking as he clawed at the grate. It opened. Someone had left it unlocked. He pulled himself out, slammed it shut, and collapsed on the cold floor above, gasping for air. He was alive, but he had seen something he wasn't supposed to. And now he carried a secret buried beneath the floors of Rome's finest villa. Titus didn't sleep that night. He lay on the cold stone floor of the servant quarters, arms around his knees, staring into the dark. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Lucius's torch vanish, swallowed by something unseen. He heard the scream, the kind a man makes only when something unnatural touches him, but no one spoke of it the next morning. Lucius didn't call for him. No punishment came. The other slaves avoided his gaze like he was cursed. By midday, word spread. Lucius had a deep gash across his chest. He claimed he had fallen onto a blade during an inspection, but everyone whispered a different version. The boy in the pit did it. But there was no boy, was there? Titus wanted answers, but questions were dangerous, so he kept his head down. He returned to work, feeding horses, sweeping courtyards, pretending that everything was normal. Yet he couldn't stop thinking about the word he saw carved over and over again in the chamber. Libertas. Freedom. Late that night, a voice whispered beside him as he scrubbed the mosaic hallway. "You saw him, didn't you?" It was Ilya, a servant girl barely 13. Titus looked up, startled. "The boy in the corner," she said. "With the silent eyes, you saw him." He nodded slowly. Ilya crouched beside him. "He was my brother." Titus blinked. "What?" "They took him down a year ago. Said he was lazy. He never came back, but I heard him. Some nights I still hear him." She pointed to the stones beneath their feet. "He's down there, and he's not alone." Titus's stomach turned. "Then why haven't you told anyone?" She laughed bitterly. "Told who? The guards? Lucius? He made the pit. He feeds it." He wanted to ask more, but Elia vanished down the corridor. Her last words echoed in his head. He feeds it. 2 days passed. Then a new boy arrived. Barefoot, bruised, and barely 9, the boy's name was Nero. Sold by his mother, he was thrown into the villa like a sack of waste, and Lucius took an interest in him immediately. A beautiful boy, he said, strong, curious, but untrained. Titus watched the senator's gaze and felt something dark twist in his gut. That night, Nero was taken to the pit. Titus knew he couldn't let another child vanish like he almost had. He waited until the house slept. Then, barefoot and shaking, he crept past the sleeping guards toward the locked door. It was open again. The iron grate stood ajar. Torch in hand, he descended once more. This time, not as a prisoner, but as someone with a purpose. As he reached the bottom, the silence greeted him like an old friend. The circular chamber was just as he remembered. Empty. Still. Except a small cry echoed from the passage behind the wall. Nero? He followed it. Step by step into darkness, into the walls Rome itself had forgotten. But something followed him too. Titus held the torch close to his chest as he moved deeper into the tunnels. The cry had stopped. Only silence remained now. Thick, almost alive. The walls pressed inward. Water dripped from above like tears from the stone. He had no map, no plan. Just the memory of Nero's voice and the fire in his chest. The further he went, the colder it became. Not just physically. Something down there stole warmth, hope, even thought. Titus felt his breath shorten. His legs trembled. But he didn't stop. Then, in the distance, he heard it again. A whisper. This time not from Nero Samtisa, but from everywhere. Titus. His name carried on a voice he didn't recognize. Soft. Male. Not threatening, but ancient. He turned, torch shaking. Who's there? No reply. He pressed on, coming to a narrow opening in the stone. It led to a wider chamber, circular and damp. In the center was a wooden cage, and inside, Nero, curled up, bruised, but breathing. Nero! Titus rushed forward. The boy blinked, dazed. Titus? I'm getting you out of here, he said, gripping the cage door. But it was locked tight, and behind him the tunnel groaned, a low moan like stone shifting, or something massive stirring. Then, the torch flickered and died. Darkness slammed into him like a wave. He dropped to his knees, hands still on the cage. Nero clutched his arm. It's here. Titus tried to speak, but the whisper came again, right beside his ear. Free them. He turned, breathless. In the pitch black, the faintest glow emerged from the far side of the chamber. A shape, barely human, outlined in silver mist. Slender, sad-eyed, wrapped in chains that weren't touching the ground. It was the boy from before, but this time he wasn't silent. You saw me, he said. Now you must help me. Who are you? Titus asked, heart pounding. I was the first, the one they forgot. I was a gift from Gaul. I cleaned their floors. I sang when they asked. I starved when they were cruel, and when I spoke of escape. He lifted his arms, shackled wrists bound by ethereal chains. They silenced me, but not forever. Titus could barely breathe. Why are you showing me this? Because, the boy said, drifting closer, you still have a voice. And they've made a mistake. What mistake? They let you live. The air grew heavy. The walls shook. From above came the sound of footsteps. Fast, heavy. Guards. They're coming, Nero whispered. Titus turned to the ghost boy. What do I do? The spirit raised a hand and pointed behind the cage. A stone slab, barely visible, with symbols etched into it. Freedom is buried there, he said. Let it out. And then the ghost vanished. The torch relit in Titus's hand, as if by unseen breath. He wasted no time. Rushing to the slab, he pushed with all his strength. It scraped open just enough to reveal something hidden underneath. Bones. Dozens of small, shackled skeletons. And among them, a key. He grabbed it, unlocked the cage, pulled Nero into his arms just as voices echoed from the corridor. Torchlight! They're in here! They had to move, but not upward. Down. Into a tunnel none of them had ever seen. Titus didn't hesitate. With Nero's hand in his, he slipped through the narrow crevice revealed beneath the bones. The tunnel was barely wide enough to crawl through, and the damp stone tore at their knees and elbows. Behind them, the voices of the guards grew louder. Hurry, he whispered. Keep your head down. The tunnel stretched downward in a slope, the air growing thicker, heavier. The flickering torch barely held, its flame choking on the moist darkness. Just when Titus thought the walls might close in entirely, they emerged into a cavernous space, wide, echoing, and ancient. This was not part of the villa. This was older. On the walls were carvings, hundreds of them, etched by fingernail and stone, names, dates, and the same word repeated in 100 hands. Libertas. Where are we? Nero asked, trembling. I don't know, Titus said, but this is where they sent the ones they wanted to forget. There were scraps of cloth, remnants of sandals, and piles of shackles rusted through. In the center of the cavern stood a crumbling statue. A boy, arms outstretched, broken chains at his wrists. It's him, Titus said. The ghost. The boy from the pit. As if summoned, the air shifted. Coldness swept through the chamber. And then the voice returned. You found the names, it whispered. You carry our story now. Suddenly, the walls began to rumble. Dust fell from the ceiling. The tunnel they came through began to collapse. We're trapped, Nero cried. No, Titus said, gripping his hand tighter. There's another way. There has to be. As the stones fell behind them, something near the statue clicked. A hidden mechanism revealed a set of stone steps, leading upward toward light. But light meant danger. I think it leads back into the villa, Titus muttered. We can't go back, Nero said. But they had no choice. They ran, up the stairs, through the crack, until they emerged inside a storeroom beneath the kitchen. Empty, dusty, forgotten. Titus slammed the hatch shut behind them. He looked down at Nero, and for the first time the boy smiled. You brought me back, he whispered. Titus didn't answer. He was already planning what came next. He knew now what Lucius was hiding. Not just a chamber, but a graveyard of children. And he was going to make Rome hear it. The next morning, Titus returned to his duties. No one noticed that he was bruised. No one asked why Nero looked different, quieter, paler, his eyes now carrying a secret weight. Lucius limped through the halls, his chest wrapped in bandages. He didn't mention the pit. He didn't mention the missing children. But the servants felt the tension in the air. Something had shifted. And then something unimaginable happened. Titus spoke. He waited until the entire household had gathered in the atrium. Slaves lined up for inspection, guests mingling with wine in hand. He stood in the center of the mosaic floor, lifted his chin, and called Lucius by name. Master Varius, he said clearly. Gasps. The other children shrank back. One of the guards reached for his whip, but Lucius raised a hand. Let him speak. Titus did. He told them of the pit, of the bones, of the names, of the children Lucius had buried in silence beneath his marble floors. He told them about Nero and Elia's brother and the ghost who watched but never rested. Lucius laughed. A child's fantasy, he said. Are we really entertaining this? Titus pulled something from beneath his tunic. A shackle, rusted through, still stained with dried blood. Etched into it was a single name, Marcus. Elia stepped forward. That was my brother's name, she whispered. He was 10. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The guests began to murmur. Then Nero, trembling, spoke for the first time. He locked me in a cage. That was all it took. The silence cracked. Slaves who had served for decades stepped forward. One by one, they began to speak. About disappearances, screams, wounds never explained, children who went down and never came back. Lucius shouted, "Lies! They are all lying!" But no one listened anymore. That afternoon, word spread across the city. A senator's villa was hiding a mass grave. By nightfall, Lucius Varius was arrested. The pit was uncovered. And for the first time in decades, the doors of that house opened for something other than chains. They called it the House of the Forgotten. When Roman officials excavated the ruins weeks later, they found exactly what Titus had described. A vast underground maze, filled with evidence of generations of suffering. Children's bones, scratched messages, rusted chains fused to the stone. The city was shocked. Senators pretended they had no idea. Historians quickly pushed the scandal into silence. But the story didn't die, because Titus survived. He and Nero were taken in by a family of freedmen. Elia too. They were given food, clothing, and, for the first time, names that no one could take away. Titus never forgot the boy in the corner, the ghost who pointed the way, the one who had been forgotten by the world, but who refused to be erased. Years later, when Titus became a teacher, he wrote down everything: names, symbols, memories. He told his students that true power doesn't come from gold or titles, but from the courage to speak when silence is expected. The villa was eventually torn down. A new structure was built in its place, but in the center of the courtyard, they left something untouched. A single stone, carved by hand, that read, Libertas, for the children who were never meant to be remembered. But they were, because one boy dared to speak. Because one voice, no matter how small, can shake the foundations of an empire. For centuries, stories like Titus's have been buried, literally and figuratively, beneath the glorified image of ancient civilizations. But history is not just about emperors and wars. It's about the forgotten, the silenced, and the brave souls who refuse to vanish. If this story moved you, help us give voice to more like it. Subscribe to our channel for more emotional and powerful true stories from the past. And never forget, sometimes the smallest voice is the one that changes everything.